All right. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. This is going to be a two-part forum that I'm doing here. I'm going to be speaking to two candidates for Legislative District 10, Position 1. And right now, I am joined with the incumbent, Representative Clyde Shavers. So here we go. How you doing, Clyde?
Good. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
No, thanks for coming on. It's always good to be able to talk to everyone, and I'm excited to hear a little bit about your campaign and about what it is that you plan on doing if reelected, and what you're most proud of. So, real quick, do you have any statements that you want to put out, or?
Yeah, no, I really appreciate being here. It's important to connect with voters, and I appreciate your help in me reaching out to as many people as possible. So like you mentioned, I am the current state representative for the 10th Legislative District. This district spans all of Island County, parts of Skagit, and then also parts of Snohomish. So quite a large and interesting district. I think what's incredible is being able to represent so many different people with different backgrounds, with different experiences, different ideas. And so we've really worked hard these past two sessions. Just finished our first term as your state representative, having passed 7 of our own bills, and then also co-sponsoring more than 30. So definitely working hard, first one in, last one out, making sure that your voice is heard.
All right. Well, thank you. So I'm going to jump right into some of the questions that I have. And these questions are kind of Washington state wide, that we kind of have some issues with, that I wanted to see what your thoughts were, and how it is that going forward, if reelected, you would help fix it. So first off, what are your thoughts on Washington state's initiative process, and do you plan on keeping it? There's been rumors that the majority party right now has plans on removing the initiative process, and I want to know what your thoughts were.
Yeah, to me, the number one thing we need to really focus on is making sure that the people's voice is being heard at every step of government, of every level, of every processes, of every vote, every policy we make. And so to me, I truly support the initiative process, the process for folks to gather signatures, the folks to be really passionate about a topic or a policy area and say, hey, we want to be heard. We want to be heard, not just in Olympia, not just in our city halls, but actually heard on the ballot. So I do appreciate the advocacy, the political involvement that our folks are having. And so I do support the initiative process. Just get as many people involved in politics in a productive, positive way as possible.
All right. Well, perfect. So if you were ever in a majority, and well, you are in a majority, so but if ever it came up and people said, hey, it's time to get rid of the initiative process, you would definitely be in opposition to that.
Right. Yes. I mean,
okay.
I think it's important, again, for people to say, hey, my voice was and is heard at the ballot.
Okay. Well, perfect. Thank you so much. So speaking of initiatives, there were 3 that were voted on in the legislature. I believe you voted to approve all 3 of them, which covered bringing back police pursuits, school choice, and preventing Washington state from ever having an income tax. And so I wanted to ask you about those 3 things. So you obviously seem to support school choice, and you support keeping an income tax out of Washington state, and you realize that we have some issues with the police that need to be fixed.
Yeah, and I can kind of broadly talk about those 3 initiatives because for those who aren't aware, there are, I believe, 6, maybe 7 initiatives now.
7 now.
Yeah, total. And so the legislature took 3 of those directly to our House floor to vote on. And so the 4 left will be going to the November ballot for folks to vote on. But in terms of, let's say, public safety and law enforcement, our office has been leading, making sure that we give our law enforcement professionals, our public safety professionals, our peace officers, the tools and resources to do their job right. I mean, it's very difficult, very challenging for those who are serving in public safety nowadays. And my job is to make sure that we tell them, not just tell them, but we actually take action saying, we support you, and how can we support you better? How can we make sure that our communities are safe? And how can we ensure that our police officers are doing their job right? And so you mentioned the initiative about police pursuit. Actually, this has been an initiative or a policy that we've been supporting since the very beginning of our election 2 years ago. So I co-sponsored a bill, Representative Alicia Rule's bill, on actually almost the same thing of ensuring that police officers are better able to pursue suspected criminals last year. So our very first session. So I was a number 3 co-sponsor to that bill. It was a bipartisan bill with Republicans and Democrats. And then the issue came up again, and I voted yes for that initiative. So this policy, this initiative has always been a priority for us. In terms of other initiatives that are on the ballot, for example, I did vote no on the PSC gas bill. This was the reason I voted no on it was because I'm concerned about how it will affect negatively the vulnerable communities, those low-income communities. It's important for us to balance all the different types of policy areas and interests we have. So in this case, how do we balance cost-effective, efficient, and meaningful environmental protection measures, but also ensuring that our low-income, vulnerable communities aren't being affected? And so this bill was something I really couldn't vote yes on, and I voted no on it. So this bill will also come on this November ballot as well.
Okay.
There are other initiatives, and it would take me quite some time to explain, but
Yeah.
But those are the kind of the major initiatives that I voted for.
All right. So the reason I focused on the ones that were passed is because one of the biggest issues that people in Washington State, statewide, doesn't matter what legislative district you're in, are having trouble with is crime. And one of the things, and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe Washington State is number 50 as far as police officers per capita in the country. So that's a problem, and that tells me that our police officers have not felt loved and appreciated, and they kind of got pushed out. Now, a lot of it came, I think, after the incident with Mr. Floyd when he was murdered, and unfortunately, a lot of good police officers also took the brunt of the outrage, and it's had a negative effect going out from there. So you will be, and you have been, so you will continue to be a supporter of our police, and you're going to try and incentivize more police officers coming to the state. What would you do to try and incentivize more police officers coming here?
Yeah, so you touch upon a really important issue that's facing our state. It's the recruitment and retention of good police officers, of good peace officer and public safety professionals. And so I've been working closely with Senator John Lovett, actually, on a bill that ensures we must retain those law enforcement officers. So I co-sponsored or I companioned a bill that passed on the Senate side, Senator John Lovett's bill, working closely with him on providing more flexible work schedules for these officers across various police departments. So this allows, let's say, new mothers who need to take care of their new child. She can't work the full duty shift. So how do we ensure that police officers like those that want to continue serving can still serve in their jurisdiction? Now, there are retirees, for example, that want to go back to the police force. How do we allow them to do so at a more meaningful and flexible work schedule? So thankfully that passed. Really proud of that bill, and looking forward to making sure that those who want to serve, who want to continue serving, are able to. I think this bill will create a new, more diverse law enforcement family across Washington State, and we're really tackling this issue head on.
Okay. Well, thank you for answering that. And I think a lot of people will appreciate hearing that, because I know the biggest issue that I consistently hear about in Washington State on both sides is what is going on, with the lawlessness. So thank you for that. If elected, reelected, what are you hoping to fix and how? I should have said, what are the top 2 things you'd like to fix and how?
Yeah, it's a difficult question to answer because there are so many bills, so many priorities that we're pushing forward. Our first 2 sessions, we drafted and pushed about 12 or so bills, more than 10 each session. So unusually large number of bills. But we did that because there are so many priorities and issues that our community members are facing. And so it's unfair to just pick and choose. So we've kind of made sure that, hey, your voice is going to be heard, and we will fight for every single issue and every single bill we push forward. I think if I was going to, and this isn't, a number one, number two, number three kind of most important tier
You
system.
can use more. I just said two because I didn't want to overtax you. So if you
Yeah,
got more, go for it.
I think, for me, mental and behavioral health is a crisis. It's a crisis among our young adults, and actually really kind of causing our even littlest learners to have issues coping with these emotions and developing these mental and behavioral health issues. I'm the vice chair of the House Education Committee, so a lot of this really to me is very personal, listening to public testimony from parents, from kids. So we're really tackling this in several different avenues. I think first, we need to provide more mental and behavioral health support in our schools. So this year we are drafting policy that not only targets funding and personnel on the high school level, let's say, or the middle school, but even elementary school. My hope as the vice chair of the House Education Committee is to impress upon every one of our littlest learners, whether it's in early learning, first grade to fifth grade, is that we all have these really difficult emotions, right? Anger or sadness. How can I help you be able to learn how to deal with those emotions in a positive way? I think if we can really help our littlest learners know that it's okay to be angry, but let's try to figure out how to deal with it positively, we'll have less and less mental and behavioral health issues in the future. We're also really tackling on the technology side. So we've been really working on a bill that addresses social media use among our young adults, our young teens. It is well known now with concrete data that the prevalent use of social media in a really negative, degrading way can really cause mental and behavioral health issues across all age ranges. So how do we tackle that? How do we kind of provide those guardrails so that our kids can use, let's say, social networks or the internet or social media in a positive way rather than tearing each other down? And finally, we're also working on artificial intelligence use. I know it's still very new, but in my mind, artificial AI is being used really in a really negative way that's really affecting how we operate, how we interact with folks, how we live. So last session, we introduced the first major artificial intelligence bill that prohibits discriminatory use of AI. It didn't pass, but we're not giving up. And so how do we make sure that technology is used to help us, help our young learners, rather than really kind of cause issues? The second kind of priority area, as you mentioned too, we're really focusing on affordable housing. Affordable housing to me encapsulates low income folks, it encapsulates vulnerable communities. How do we ensure that seniors aren't being pushed out of their homes because of rising property taxes, for example? And how do we ensure that young people who just graduated from high school or from college are able to enter the housing market in a productive way? So there's two ways we're tackling this. First, so not last session, but the session before that, I worked closely with Representative Sharon Wiley on expanding the property tax exemption programs for seniors, veterans, and people with disabilities. So how do we ensure that more people in those kind of low income brackets can get their property taxes lowered or actually just completely exempted? Because I don't want our seniors who've lived in their home for decades to have to move because of rising property taxes. That's a priority for us. The second thing we're really focusing on is how do we create more housing? How do we increase supply? And so actually this morning, I just had a conversation with the Building Codes Council to try to figure out how can we include 3D printing technology in the creation of more tiny homes. And so we're writing a bill right now. 3D printing, for those who aren't aware, is kind of like a robot arm creating these tiny homes in a very fast, efficient way, in a very cost-effective, low cost-effective manner. So it'll be one of the first major 3D printing bills in Washington State, and we're looking forward to really utilizing this new technology to address affordable housing.
All right. Well, thank you. Well, you touched on two of the questions that I had coming up next. One was going to be education, and you hit a lot of that. So I will ask you one question. So you mentioned technology, and this is just me as a parent asking,
Mhm.
right? Because so my son, he sometimes asks for help with his math homework, and
Mhm.
I'm like, oh yeah, sure, give me the paper. There is no paper. It's on the computer, and so I have to figure out how to navigate the technology, which I am terrible at, in
Mhm.
order to help him. So one of the questions that I have is for education, we are seeing a serious drop, at least here in the LD10 area. We've seen people who are not hitting quotas. Our kids aren't hitting the quotas for where they need to be as far as math, reading, writing. Why do you think that is, and what do you think we can do to try and improve that?
Yeah, so the kind of the mantra that I always follow is third grade. Third grade is kind of the point where the mantra is from before third grade, a child should be learning to read. And then after third grade, when they hit that mark, they should be reading to learn. And so my concern is we are seeing, you're right, this kind of this drop in reading literacy at the third grade level. Because once, if you're not at reading level at third grade, you're going to fall behind in the
Mm-hmm.
future, and it just gets worse and worse, and other problems kind of compound. You know, as vice chair again, we've been kind of having these meetings on trying to figure out where can we reallocate funding, for example, or reallocate focus on a curriculum to address these challenges that we're seeing. We were hoping that, post-pandemic, we're going to be back to levels that were pre-pandemic, but we're just not really seeing that across different school districts across the board. So we are discussing what are the best ways to move forward. I think second, the use of technology can be a benefit and also a disadvantage. So we are looking into cell phone usage, for example, in our schools. Is that really helping us, or is that actually causing kids to be distracted, right? And causing kids to actually not learn. So we have been looking at that issue, looking at how can we study this better, what are the data points to support, maybe restricting cell phone usage in a certain way, in a productive way. So these are the things that we're kind of grappling with. As all of us know, education really has a myriad of different kind of avenues towards addressing these issues, and we're kind of making sure that the policies we push forward are effective and inclusive as well, that really help our kids reach those milestones.
Yeah. Well, I can't speak for everyone's kids, but if my kids have a cell phone, don't bother trying to teach them something, right? They are going to be, so I don't even let my son usually leave with the cell phone. Because I know he's going to be coming back. Now, if he's going to go away on a field trip or something, yeah, take it. But yeah, it is very difficult to get kids to focus if you put a screen in front of them.
Yeah.
I've learned, and unfortunately, our kids are so inundated with screens that I think they're much more easily distractible,
Mhm.
which makes it harder to get their attention. I remember when I was in school, when you were in school,
Mhm.
we had a cell phone. That was really bad news. I
Mhm.
mean, I was like, you were in trouble.
Yeah.
So they wanted to make sure that you were free of all distractions. So we do have to balance it, right? We've got technology that's changing. The kids are used to the
Mhm.
technology. That's all that's going to be used in the future for most markets. So if you can't
Mhm.
use the technology, you're not going to get a job. But at the same time, we also need to figure out how to not distract our kids. So that is an interesting balancing act. You're right. Fentanyl is becoming an absolute crisis in our community. I think I read somewhere that every couple of minutes, I forget the exact number, but minutes, we're losing someone in Washington State to fentanyl.
Mhm.
So, what can we do to combat it? Because it's an extremely cheap drug. It's very easy to get,
Mhm.
and it's just killing people.
Yeah, this has been a priority for us as well, with the unfortunate rise in the use of fentanyl, opioid, just substance abuse in general. So last session, I co-sponsored several bills that relate to educational awareness of fentanyl use and other substance abuse in our schools. Since I work in the education space, a bill, for example, that Representative Maury Levitt actually primary sponsored, that requires schools to provide that information to students, to parents, about the dangers of fentanyl use and how to avoid that. Another bill that I co-sponsored is actually on the higher ed side. Same thing, kind of requiring information about fentanyl use, and also providing kind of mechanisms within higher ed to save those students or save those folks who may be susceptible or actually undergoing overdoses from fentanyl and other substance abuse. So in the education space, this has been a priority. Moving forward, I'm hoping to shift into the public safety realm of combating fentanyl use. It's important for our police officers to have the tools available, both statutory or legal tools, policy tools, as well as just generally, just the material and resources to kind of figure out how do we limit, mitigate, and just hopefully eventually remove this fentanyl threat on our streets, in our schools, in our homes. It's a challenging area. But we're moving forward, I think, ensuring that our schools are aware and our public safety professionals are aware as well.
All right. So looks like it's a two-pronged approach is what you're saying for
Yeah.
fentanyl. One, education, trying to keep people away from it.
Mhm.
Two, law enforcement. Is there
Mhm.
any plan to give law enforcement or pass laws that would make selling fentanyl a serious offense? I think Dr. Raul Garcia, who's running for Senate, he made a proposal that I liked.
Mhm.
You may not, but it would basically make selling fentanyl a charge of attempted murder.
Hmm.
So, is there any thought of making more serious consequences for selling?
Yeah, so I'm not in the public safety or the civil rules and judiciary committee, so I haven't heard of this proposal, at least on the House side. That's something I'll look into as well. But I do think, though, we need to ensure that we make measures that really deter folks from selling fentanyl for sure. I mean, that is, how do we ensure that we cut off the supply, right? And so that folks don't have access to that. I think, going to this kind of a similar relevant point here, what's really, really emotional for me, personal, what's really kind of sad for me is that we have had public testimony from parents in our education committee where their child died of an unintentional overdose of fentanyl use. There are so many instances now that I'm hearing where a child or an adult thought they were taking one type of medication and tends to help them, but eventually they find out it's laced with fentanyl or some other substance. So it's a really big problem we're facing. And Mari Levitt also had a bill that disallowed the use of pill making machines unless you have approval from the FDA, for example. There is no reason for anyone to have the machines that make the outline of these pills. So I think we are trying to combat that on the supply side slowly.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much. And so you already touched on the cost of housing. Now, one of the reasons that people are I've spoken to some experts, and they say one of the reasons that the price of housing, even new housing that we build, is so high. One is obviously there's not enough housing. So supply and demand increases the cost. Two is we have all these new laws and regulations on how to build the housing, which increase the costs on the builders, and that cost, of course, gets distributed to the buyer.
Mhm.
So, is there any plan on limiting or maybe trying to find some of these rules and regulations that are completely unnecessary and trying to eliminate them to reduce the cost?
Yeah, so we've been, I think, pushing bills and passing bills that does expedite or smooth out the regulatory process or the licensing process, for example, on
Right.
buildings. I'm very proud of a bill that I co-sponsored. It was primarily sponsored by Representative Amy Wallen that provides a tax incentive for those who plan to convert underutilized buildings, commercial buildings or whatever buildings, to affordable housing. There's a lot of commercial buildings, for example, in Skagit, in our district, that are not being utilized for whatever reason. And so why don't we use existing structure, right? Why don't we use buildings that have already passed through several regulatory hurdles in the past and convert that to affordable housing? So I'm very proud of co-sponsor that bill. It passed. I'm looking forward to really seeing that implementation, not just in our district, but across Washington State. As we know, for example, in Seattle, there's a lot of underutilized buildings. Why are they empty? Why can't we use that for affordable housing and really expand the supply side? So I think those are one of the things that we're really focusing on, providing those incentives.
All right. Well, perfect. So there's one question that I got to ask. So last 2 years ago, we had a campaign and it got ugly. And you were accused of, or your campaign was accused of misrepresenting your military service. and that came up, and you were attacked on it daily. It was everywhere. So I wanted to ask you, what exactly did happen, and just let you explain that.
Yeah, politics is difficult. It requires significant sacrifice, both personally and professionally. It was unfortunate to see those who continue to sow division and hate using my own father's deeply partisan letter. For me, as your representative, I'm committed to healing our communities. I'll continue to take the punches and meanness and turn around with kindness and caring. I always intend to continue focusing on delivering results and helping our communities rather than finding ways to tear each other down. As a veteran who graduated from the U.S. Naval Academy, graduated from Naval Nuclear Power School, trained at a naval nuclear reactor plant, and then later served in the Middle East and Southeast Asia, I thank every veteran, no matter who they are, across our state, across our country, for their service and sacrifice to our communities and to our countries. If it's okay, since we're highlighting, and talking about veterans and military, I would like to briefly highlight the meaningful bills that we pushed and passed for our very own veterans.
That was my next question, so please do.
Unfortunately, there are just a few number of veterans serving in the House and serving in the Senate. So it's important to really elect veterans who care for our military, who care for a strong VA system, for example. So there's several bills that we would really push. I mentioned the property tax exemption update or expansion. That relates to veterans as well, veterans who are in that income bracket, who can get their property exempted. Another bill we really pushed and passed is the Purple Star Award. This bill recognizes school districts, schools that go that extra mile for our kids of military families, whether it's academic or social emotional support. It really says to our families, you can feel relieved for being stationed here because we care about your kids. We care that we understand the challenges of multiple deployments, of not seeing your father or mother or your parents because of military duty. So I think Washington State really is, in our office, is really leading towards that as well. And I co-sponsor numerous bills that allow easier credentialing and licensing transfer for military spouses to work here, whether it's being a teacher in our educational system or in healthcare, for example. I will continue to support those bills, continue to make sure that our military spouses can easily work here, because we know that it's not just your spouse who's in the military who's sacrificing, you're also sacrificing as well. So how can we make sure we do that as well? This year, we are actually focusing on several other veteran bills as well. We are looking to expand the Veteran Service Officer statewide program so that every veteran, no matter what zip code you're in, no matter what corner of the state you're in, you have access to this Veteran Service Officer to get the benefits you deserve. Last year, we were fortunate to lead in getting funding for a Veteran Service Officer in Island County. How do we get that everywhere, across every county? So we're really focusing on that. And finally, I'm working with several representatives, the military department, on ensuring that can we extend a tax credit for businesses that employ veterans? That's important for us. Businesses that employ military spouses, businesses that are veteran owned. So how do we encourage our veteran community to be part of our ecosystem? There are so many homeless veterans who are struggling. How can we encourage them to get the employment and a meaningful life that they deserve?
Well, thank you so much. And so before we close, I wanted to give you a chance for a final statement to make your pitch for why you should be reelected, and the floor is yours.
Again, I really appreciate being here. Thank you for allowing me to take up some airspace. Like I said, serving in the legislature takes an enormous sacrifice. Sometimes it's painful. Sometimes, I have doubt on, am I doing the right thing? But I think what's really amazing is being able to talk with so many people, see how our bills really impact folks' lives. I believe that our team, our office, has been especially effective in ensuring that your priorities, your issues are being carried through in the legislature. To me, government should not be there to do nothing. Government is there to help you to take action. And so My philosophy is to solve today's problems, tomorrow's problems now. And I think we've been quite effective in doing that. And so I'm looking forward to, hopefully earning your support, and looking forward to, more importantly, just listening to your story and bringing that story and your struggle to Olympia. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Clyde, and hopefully we'll get you back on as we get closer to the general. And yeah, no, it's been a pleasure to talk to you, and I definitely look forward to seeing you on the campaign trail.
Thank you so much. All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.